This is Sg2 Perspectives, a conversation with Sg2 experts and industry thought leaders about the biggest trends in healthcare and what we expect that's going to mean for the future of healthcare delivery.
Hi, Sg2 Perspectives listeners. We are trying something fun and maybe a little dangerous. On May 22nd, we're hosting a live podcast where you can join us for the recording of an episode. Our relationship right now is a little one-sided and we want to meet you. So we'll put you in my chair. You can ask us questions, share your insights, or just heckle us. There's more information in the show notes, but you do need to register so you can get a link to attend. Hope to see you there.
If you are simply reacting to a specific task at hand or nuance that you've been handed, you're probably not setting yourself up for long-term success. You're just figuring out a Band-Aid solution that's going to push you through this fiscal year and get you into the next.
Hello and welcome to Sg2 Perspectives. I'm your host, Trevor DaRin, but I have my two co-hosts with me today, Jayme Zage and Tori Richie, because each of us talk to different members about slightly different topics just enough that when we put our heads together, we realized we've been hearing some similar themes with some overlaps, but we've also been having some pretty different discussions, and we've heard some new and interesting things, and we wanted to share that because that's the fun part of this job, is that we get to spend so much of our time talking to members, hearing a new idea, pitching a concept or framework. I'll kick us off. I tried to bundle up what I'd been hearing from members into a theme or a tone, and it really syncs with what we're going to be talking about at the Executive Summit this summer. And maybe that's just because it's on my mind a lot, but I'm seeing two worlds of systems right now that feel really confident and comfortable that they're going to have to make some bets. Either they already have or they're going to have to in the near future, and they're moving towards that. And others that feel really uncertain about it. Maybe that's because they have a legacy of picking things that didn't necessarily hit their milestones and targets recently, and they've had to divest. Or they just feel like there's a lot of options out there and they're not sure where they can have the biggest positive impact because maybe margins are still lagging or still negative. So I see two worlds, those that are pretty comfortable making some big bets right now and those that feel a lot of pressure because of it. Jayme and Tori, have you seen the same thing, or are you picking up some different themes or tones?
I'm seeing similar themes. It's interesting because there is this stark bifurcation between systems of those that are proactive with their strategy, those that already placed the bets and they're reaping the rewards of making some of those more innovative decisions and how they're going to alter care pathways versus ones that are more reactive. Perhaps there's been something occur within their market that's forcing them to change the way that they're providing care. Maybe they're reacting to payer pressures that are changing, and that's causing them to take a step back and think, oh gosh, we can't continue on this path. We need to change course now. And the tone of those conversations are very different depending on the type of organization that you're talking to. Increasingly, folks are recognizing that we can't continue to operate in the same way that we have historically, and that we need to be thinking about how we adapt and change for the future.
Absolutely. And I talk with our provider clients, but also our life sciences and industry clients, the suppliers and non-providers that we work with as well. On all sides, they're looking for different ways to sustain long-term growth. And they're looking for innovative ways to create business models that drive different revenue. So revenue diversification that we've talked about. There was one member that I talked with recently that has a strong program that they want to find ways to create additional revenue beyond just the provision of clinical care, but how do they take the data they're collecting and use it as a database that they can make money off of as well, so that they can help fuel the clinical work that they're doing. And from the supplier side, or from the life sciences and industry side, they're looking at different ways of leaning in and creating relationships with their providers, with health systems that go above and beyond just what their off-the-shelf product is, going from transactional to really being a strategic partner, a strategic supplier where they're doing more than just focusing on supply chain issues, but they're actually looking at driving efficiencies and driving quality performance in what they're doing.
Yeah, good. I see a lot of overlap in what we're hearing. Tori, I'm going to come back to you. Have you heard something that was pretty surprising lately? In some ways, there's often not a lot of surprises for us when we're jumping on the phone. Oh, a member wants to talk about forecast or primary care and have a sense of where the conversation's going to go. Then there's always those couple surprises. Oh, I didn't know we were heading this direction. Have you had one of those lately?
I have. There seems to be increased emphasis, and rightfully so, on the bottom line, on the margin that health systems are driving. And this goes even for our nonprofit systems. There seems to be this increased awareness and attention to how the service offerings contribute to the bottom line. I was in a conversation with a non-for-profit system just a couple of weeks ago where that really was the CSO's key pain point, was how do we build out additional offerings? How do we grow our penetration in what are historically thought of as lucrative procedural capabilities? This is absolutely an important question to ask, but where I want to push our members even further is it goes beyond just that procedural encounter. And it's thinking about, okay, what are the consumer segments that we really want to play in, that we really want to grow our penetration or share of care in? And what are the downstream services that those individuals need? Yes, that does translate to procedural volumes down the line, but that also means that you need to be building out primary care offerings, diagnostic and imaging services for that patient population as well.
You know, the segmentation thing makes me think of, again, my life sciences and industry customers that I work with. And they're all about how do we segment our customers? And it's the same concept. You've got to know your customer. And what was really a surprise to me recently at a forum of a number of suppliers coming together that Vizient held, to hear them talking about performance, focusing on things that were not just their sales numbers, but how are they impacting the overall delivery of care from a total cost of care perspective, from a quality and outcomes perspective, and just hear suppliers, whether it's pharmaceutical companies, med device, med surge companies, a lot of the organizations who were speaking at this conference were talking about how they've shifted to focus on those clinical and operational performance measures that our providers are also focused on.
That's so interesting, Jayme, because when I think about a asset that the life science and industry have is really the rapid innovation that's coming down the pike. And when we think about the ability to start to scale some of those solutions and some of those treatment pathways and how we can go to market with these very targeted treatment opportunities for these very select segments of the patient population, that's where we're going to start to transform the way that care is being delivered and start treating a larger bolus of patients than we've ever been able to.
It was really interesting. One life sciences company, Edwards, has actually taken a completely different model in the way that they work with their customers, and they've started to reframe even their supply contracts. Once that deal is done, then the sales rep steps back and the clinical liaison goes in. And the clinical liaison is a Six Sigma nurse. And they're able to take that product and work through, how do we need to change your protocols to make sure that you're getting the most out of our product and that it's not causing additional inefficiencies or adding inefficiencies or adding cost. They use that clinical specialist as a way to make sure that all the staff gets trained appropriately and that they're really trying to help them refine those processes. And that's got to be a part of all this clinical adoption and innovation that you're talking about. And that happens at the widget level, because any new device that you use could change the step-by-step component of the clinical pathway.
Sure. Providers are pretty fatigued. They've had a lot of new steps. That's a good one. I have two that are totally different tangents. One, I was sitting next to a chief medical officer from a big regional health system at a board meeting. And we was talking about, like so many, they went through a round of reorging and changing regions and stuff recently. And I just asked how that was going because he'd been there for a while. He was surprised that it went way smoother because they've been growing through acquisitions, like so many health systems, enough that they had some legacy experience with it. And that this was now re-region, reorg, centralization effort 2 or 3. And he felt like things were actually ahead of schedule and felt like, oh, we're a system that knows how to do this now. I didn't quite expect to hear that. So that was one. The other one was around rural, probably just because we put out recent content about this and it's one of my areas. People have been taking some different approaches and thinking about rural markets outside of their core service area as like drawing a bigger concentric circle than they ever have before when thinking about deployment of strategy across a region, and rural markets as, yeah, it's going to be overall less population, but there's still a huge opportunity to compete for those patients because we know that 2/3 of patients leave rural markets for care. Systems are drawing a bigger circle than they have before. And then thinking about the deployment, especially around new regulatory models like the rural emergency hospital designation.
At first, the tone I was hearing from the market was, this sounds okay, but it's kind of narrow because it's only for converting critical access hospitals. And I've heard that pendulum swing back a little bit, where the way in which states are approving that designation is a little more flexible than it had looked originally, and that health systems or the local hospitals thinking about it as even a little more sustainable financial model than the critical access model that they have to transition from. And I hadn't expected that. That was something surprising to me. Those are new nuggets or new blips on the radar. How about something you've heard enough that it's starting to create a pattern? You're starting to hear from different markets, different types of health systems, a theme or pattern emerge. And Tori, I'm going to loop back to what you started talking about around segments, because we've been pushing that for a long time to members. But I've started to hear it now coming back as a pattern, especially in primary care. Systems starting to think about strategies for discrete segments. Seniors is the one that's popping the most, but there's plenty of others. I'm not advocating that this is a great strategy because it's a really cherry-picked segment, but we've gotten a lot of questions about concierge options, and most health systems think it's a pretty viable model for some segment of their market. Scale is always going to be an issue. We're going to just see more and more in this pattern where systems are more willing than ever. And I know it's tough for providers to say, we're going to have some different options for different patient segments, because either it's really important to us strategically, we think we can offer something differentiated, or there's too many alternatives for that segment, and they're just not going to continue using our one-size-fits-all model.
I love this theme, and I have a lot of opinions on the topic. The more that I think about primary care and understand the nuances in ensuring that patients have access to primary care doctors, but also the services that they need, the more and more that I convince myself that a one-size-fits-all approach does not work. The reason that I say that is, how do we even define primary care? At the root of it, how do you define what your primary care service offering looks like? For somebody that is an otherwise healthy young adult that really only needs to come to see a PCP once a year for their annual wellness check, that rounds out primary care services for them, versus somebody that's battling stage 4 cancer. The suite of primary care offerings, what's truly primary for them, looks very different. It means access to a variety of specialists, rapid access to diagnostic and lab workup. It means connecting not only with their oncologist, but perhaps with an endocrinologist, perhaps with other specialists, to ensure that the whole patient is being treated. And is it right to lump those two patients into the same primary care offering? I don't know that it does.
As we look at our outpatient portfolio and think about the spectrums, at one end, you have the low acuity transactional young, healthy person that Tori just described. Could even just be the gut influenza and you need to go in, you're not feeling well, or you have a sports injury, those types of one and done transactional type care. At the other end of the spectrum, you have those more complex, like oncology patient, or that senior population that tends to have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 chronic diseases they're managing. It is a different level. And those patients are also going to use a lot more healthcare services in general, because you're not just in wellness mode, you're in health maintenance mode. We're seeing health systems start to think more strategically about which are the primary care patient populations that we need to invest in and focus on. And thinking about it from that disease spectrum, that is one of the reasons why we're seeing some of the disruptors come in, because they're taking some of those more transactional level because it's easier. They can be more convenient, especially for that one and done young patient population, right? I just need to make sure that I get my cholesterol checked every year because I have family history. That's all I need. So I'll just go to Village MD, or I'll just go to the doc at the mall, or I'll do it online. We're going to start to see more and more segmentation of primary care and specialty care practices, thinking more about what we want to be. It goes back to, what do you want to be on the inpatient side? Then you can back into that. What do we need to be in our primary care space?
It's effectively triaging your patient population. And this is something that we do so well in the ED or in the inpatient care setting, but something that we don't do very well in the lower acuity sites of care. It's figuring out, how do I make sure that I'm carving out enough resources for those more complex patient populations, the ones that really need to have priority access to healthcare services. And I meet those needs first. And then with any remaining capacity, I'm thinking about the folks that need to get that annual cholesterol check.
Good. We're hearing a similar theme. Jayme, I'm going to come back to you.
I'm also hearing another theme or tone around some pretty persistent challenges that I wouldn't say health systems have a solve for. They're asking questions, but it's not questions about verifying a specific strategy or pressure testing something. It's more educational, informational to get their arms around some of these big rocks. They're the world's strongest man competition. They're trying to figure out how to solve the puzzle yet. They haven't solved it.
So I'll go back to the Vizient Supplier Forum that I was at recently. The speaker from Kaufman Hall talked about, we've all seen their pulse reports where you've got the margins slowly creeping back, but that's the national perspective. And when they dig under the hood, we know that there are some who are doing quite well from a margin perspective, who have recovered well from the issues of the last 4 years. There are others who are still very negative. I mean, he calls them the haves and the have-nots. And when they dug in to why some organizations are doing better than others, it came down to a cultural approach to problem solving. Those who were willing to embrace a different way of doing things more easily were more likely to be on the positive side of the margins than those who continued to do things status quo. So another thing that came up was no change, no change. That was just a phrase that was thrown out at the summit. And if you don't change anything, you shouldn't expect anything different. Hence the impact of change forecast. If you change something, there's going to be a change. This is what a lot of organizations are still struggling with. And if they're struggling with cost, for instance, their approach is, well, just figure out how to lower cost, cut staff, look at device costs to come down and try to renegotiate your contracts there. But it's got to be that plus. It's got to be in that performance lens in addition to just the product. And that's true from the provider perspective as well as the life sciences and industry perspective. You've got to think differently in order to get through some of these challenges. Some organizations have a hard time doing that.
My cynical take is there's only a couple kinds of health systems that are doing well on the margin side right now. It's for-profits, it's huge AMCs who shifted a lot of their low acuity stuff out and backfilled with more complex surgeries. And it's systems that are just in really good growth markets. It's probably accurate that they have thought about things differently, but it may be because they have the means to do so. To build off yours, I've definitely heard those who are not on that side of the spectrum feeling like they have a lot of uncertainty about how they could get there, or if they have the resources, options, potential to do more than incremental growth on their financial side this year.
There are organizations that have figured it out. That doesn't mean that it's an impossible puzzle to solve for the folks that fall on the other side of that distribution curve that you referred to. That goes back to, are you taking a proactive or a reactive approach to your strategy? And are you in control of your own destiny? If you are simply reacting to a specific task at hand or nuance that you've been handed, you're probably not setting yourself up for long-term success. You're just figuring out a Band-Aid solution that's going to push you through this fiscal year and get you into the next. The change needs to be much more grassroots than that and bottom up, and really thinking through how you're going to fully change the way that you're delivering care to ensure that you're operating in a much more efficient manner to set yourself up then to flip the sign on your contribution margin.
Yeah, I like that, Tori. In addition to being proactive, it's also that future focus. Having prepared, planning the different scenarios out in a way that you're like, okay, there are some different things that we see potentially coming down the pike. How is that going to change our strategy? Does that create an opportunity that maybe we can get in on early and we can prepare for so that we're ready to flip the switch on it? There's a little bit of proactive, but it's also that forward thinking and knowing what's coming for the future and doing some planning around what that future might hold.
And we've seen a nice bump in margins at the beginning of the year, and we'll see if that's sustainable. Some of it might be 2 midnights finally coming into effect. I heard it might be the impact of some like 340B settlement payments. So there's a lot of speculation about if that's going to be sustainable or not. We will be keeping a close eye on it. So Jayme and Tori, as always, thanks for sharing what you've been hearing and sharing your perspectives with our listeners. Always fun to get to talk with both of you. Talk to you again soon.
Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review us, and/or follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn at Sg2 Healthcare. And if you want to talk more about innovative healthcare strategies, you can always email me at sg2perspectives@sg2.com. Finally, Sg2 is a Vizient company, and there are a bunch of Vizient podcasts that you might like. You can find them at Vizient /podcasts. Have a great day.